Alex, I spent most of my life thinking color was something that came in a can of stain or a piece of exotic wood. You want red? You buy paddock. You want purple? You splurge on Purple Heart. Then I discovered resin, and suddenly I was standing in front of a cabinet full of pigments, feeling like a toddler with his first box of 64 crayons. It's terrifying.
Is that why your first few river tables looked like they were filled with liquefied highlighter ink? Because toddler with crayons is exactly the vibe I got from those early scrap pieces.
I deserved that. I really did. I thought, hey, if a little blue's good, a whole bottle of cobalt must be professional grade. I ended up with a slab of wood that looked like it was being eaten by a smurf. It was so opaque you couldn't see the grain, and it looked about as natural as a polyester suit.
Well, luckily for everyone's retinas, we're doing a deep dive today. We're talking color theory specifically for resin, how to mix it, what to use, and how not to turn a $300 piece of Baltic birch into a cautionary tale.
It's a different beast than painting a wall. With resin, you're working with depth and light. It's 3D color.
Let's start with the basics for someone sitting at their kitchen table right now, looking at a bottle of clear epoxy. The biggest hurdle is usually, what do I actually put in this stuff to make it pretty? Most people think they have to go out and buy a $100 kit of official resin tints.
And that's a trap. If you got a hobby closet, you're probably sitting on a gold mine. I've reached for the most random things: acrylic paints from the craft bin, mica powders, even kitchen spices. I once used turmeric for a warm amber glow. The shop smelled like a curry house for a week, but the color was gorgeous.
Wait, spices? Aren't you worried about the chemistry? I mean, resin is a finicky mistress. You can't just throw random organic material in there without things getting crunchy.
That's the catch. You have to be mindful of the 5% rule. Basically, your colorant, whatever it is, should never make up more than 5% of your total mix. Think of it as a 1 to 20 ratio. You cross that line, and the resin gets a bit pouty. It might stay tacky, or it won't cure at all, and then you've just created a very expensive puddle of colorful goo.
Pouty resin is a terrifying thought. So, if I'm using acrylic paint, the cheap 2Oz bottles everyone has, I'm basically just putting in a few drops.
Exactly. A little goes a long way. Acrylics are heavy in water, and water is the mortal enemy of epoxy. If you dump half a tube of Liquitex in there, the resin is going to foam up like a rabid dog. But a few drops, it gives you this lovely creamy opacity that's perfect for marble effects.
Now, what about the shiny stuff? The river table look usually involves those pearlescent powders. How do you handle those without making it look like a 90s bass boat?
The base boat effect, that's usually a result of overmixing or using too much mica. Those Pearl X and mica powders are actually microscopic flakes. They don't dissolve, they're just hanging out in the liquid. If you want those cells or that movement, you need to stir them just enough to distribute, then let the resin's natural heat do the heavy lifting.
You mentioned heat. Are we talking hairdryer heat or dragon's breath torch heat?
Oh, get the torch or a proper heat gun. A hairdryer is just a glorified leaf blower for your resin. It'll spray your expensive blue juice all over the shop walls. You want a heat gun to pop the bubbles and to gently, emphasize gently, nudge the colors around. That's how you get those wisps that look like smoke caught in glass.
Okay, so here's a pro question. I've seen people use alcohol inks for that petri dish look. It's totally different from the acrylic look, right?
It's night and day. Alcohol ink stays translucent. It's like looking through stained glass. If you're doing a deep pour, say a thick wood slab, alcohol inks let the light travel all the way to the bottom. It makes the wood look like it's floating in water rather than being buried in plastic. But be warned, alcohol inks fade in sunlight faster than a cheap beach towel. If your piece is going near a window, you've got to use UV-resistant resin or a specific pigment.
Let's talk about the canvas. I noticed you use Baltic birch plywood instead of regular artist canvases. Is that just you being a cheapskate, or is there a structural reason?
A bit of both, honestly, but mostly resin is heavy. You pour a quart of resin onto a stretched fabric canvas, and the center is going to sag like an old mattress. Suddenly, all your beautiful color drifts to the middle, and you've got a blue crater. Plywood stays flat. I usually prime it first with a bit of spray paint, neutral white or black, so the resin doesn't just soak into the wood pores and disappear.
That makes sense. It's like painting a wall. You don't want the thirsty wood drinking all your expensive tinted epoxy.
Exactly. I learned that the hard way when I tried to do a seafoam pour on raw cedar. I came back an hour later, and the resin had vanished into the grain, leaving behind nothing but a sticky, sad-looking crust. I felt like I'd just watched $40 evaporate.
Let's get into the actual art of it. If I want to make something look like a marble countertop, am I just throwing white and gray in a cup and hoping for the best?
That's the pave and pray method, and it rarely works. For a marble effect, you want to use the dirty pour technique. You have your main color, usually a thick, opaque white, and then you layer your veins in a separate cup. You don't stir it, you just dump it. Let the gravity do the work.
Dump and hope sounds more like your style.
Hey, there's a refined grace to the dump. The trick is the tilt. You pick up that board and you move it like you're trying to solve one of those little plastic ball in a maze puzzles. You're stretching the molecules of the color. That's how you get those long, elegant veins instead of blocky stripes.
Okay, let's talk safety before we get too deep into the vibes. You're wearing an apron, I see a respirator on the bench. People see craft resin and they think it's as safe as Elmer's glue.
This is where I get serious. Resin is a chemical reaction. When part A meets part B, a war starts, and the byproduct is fumes. I've had days early on where I didn't ventilate well enough, and I woke up the next morning feeling like I'd spent the night breathing in a tire fire. Wear the respirator, use the gloves. If you get it on your skin, don't wait. Wipe it off with some vinegar or a dedicated orange oil cleaner. Soap and water just spreads the misery around.
And the space? I assume you're not doing this on your grandmother's heirloom dining table.
Not unless you want to be written out of the will. I use 55-gallon trash bags. I just slit them open and tape them down. Resin hates trash bag plastic. It won't stick. Once it's dry, you just peel it off and it's like the mess never happened. It's the closest thing to magic in a workshop.
We've talked about what to put in and how to pour it, but what about the why? When you're choosing colors, do you have a plan or are you just grabbing what's closest to the stir sticks?
I try to think about contrast. If I've got a dark piece of walnut, I'm not going to use a dark forest green. It'll just look like a black void from 5 feet away. I'll reach for a copper or a bright teal. You want the wood and the resin to have a conversation, not to scream over each other.
A conversation. Hey, Walnut, you look grainy today. Thanks, Teal, you're looking quite translucent yourself.
Precisely. But the most important lesson I ever learned, and the one that saved my sanity, is that the resin is going to keep moving long after you walk out of the shop. You might have the perfect swirl at 9 o'clock p.m., but the laws of fluid dynamics are working the graveyard shift.
So what, you just let go?
You have to. You find a point where you like it, you pop the bubbles one last time, and then you walk away. If you keep poking at it, you'll ruin it. It's like a good story. You have to know when to stop talking and let the audience feel it.
That might be the most zen thing you've ever said, Tiger, even if it is about colorful plastic.
Plastic can be spiritual too, Alex, especially when it's not stuck to your fingertips.
Fair enough. So if you're listening and you're ready to take the plunge, start small. Grab those acrylics from the junk drawer, find a scrap of plywood, and just see how the light moves through it.
And remember, your first piece probably won't be a masterpiece. It might look like a melted box of crayons. But that's just the cost of learning the language.
Well said. Next time, maybe we'll talk about how to get that resin out of your beard.
That requires a very sharp pair of scissors and a lot of regret. We'll save that for another day.
Thanks for hanging out in the den today. Now go get your hands dirty, carefully.
Catch you on the next pour.